What if the most beautiful places on Earth were built on secrets no one was meant to find? High above the Pacific, a mansion once shimmered with elegance, but beneath the chandeliers, something darker waited. Power, obsession, betrayal. For over a century, it's kept its silence, until now. Because what we're about to uncover at San Francisco's Cliff House was never supposed to be seen. We'll explain everything in this video. Don't skip it. Perched on the edge of the continent, where the Pacific crashes against unforgiving cliffs, the Cliff House began as a vision of grandeur in 1863, born from ambition and the restless energy of a city still defining itself. San Francisco was young, pulsing with the fever of opportunity, its streets still muddied from the gold rush, its nights lit by gas lamps that flickered like tentative stars. Into this raw landscape rose a structure both delicate and commanding, a mansion of observation, a house built to stare into infinity. Its first patrons arrived by horse-drawn carriage, their polished boots striking the wooden planks of the narrow paths that led to the bluff, each step a quiet proclamation: "We have arrived." They came for the view, yes, for the thrill of seeing the ocean meet the sky in violent, endless motion. But they came also for something quieter, more insidious, to see themselves reflected in a mirror of opulence, to confirm that wealth could buy more than comfort, that it could purchase immortality. The original structure was modest by later standards, a wooden frame adorned with simple Victorian flourishes, a tea-house at heart, but already there was the whisper of obsession, the faint hum of perfection demanded by its creators. It was a house that wanted to be seen, and in being seen, it demanded attention, scrutiny, admiration. Patrons would ascend to the terraces and balconies, their eyes tracing the coastline, their ears filled with the roar of waves, and yet the mansion itself seemed to breathe, a living witness to their desires, their quiet anxieties, their unspoken rivalries. And within these walls, the first intimations of tragedy began to murmur. Fires would come later, devastating in their suddenness, but already the mansion carried the weight of its creators' expectations, the invisible toll of constructing beauty in defiance of nature. Each nail driven, each pane of glass fitted, was a negotiation with the wind, the salt, the relentless ocean. The mansion's first patrons did not merely visit, they performed. Afternoon teas were a choreography of silks and lace, polite laughter concealing envy and suspicion. Gentlemen measured themselves against one another in the soft light of the cliffs, while women traded secrets behind screens, their whispers slipping into corners where even the sea could not reach them. The Cliff House was a stage, and life inside it was performance. It was here that the human cost of grandeur began to show, subtle at first. A nervous glance, a strained smile, a quiet resentment of those who had it all, yet demanded more. And the mansion absorbed it. Every subtle tension pressed into the grains of wood, into the paint on the walls, into the very foundations that clung desperately to the earth. The house was a repository of ambition and quiet suffering, an archive of the human need to be seen, to be remembered, to be more than mortal in the eyes of others. Twice, the mansion would be claimed by fire, each time a sudden, terrible reckoning that left the community reeling. The first fire was merciful in its swiftness but devastating in its consequence, reducing wood and varnish to ash while the cliffs below remained indifferent, waves oblivious to the ambitions destroyed above them. Patrons wept, architects despaired, yet the owners rebuilt, this time with more flourish, more insistence that beauty could conquer calamity. The second fire was more violent, almost vengeful, as if the mansion itself had become complicit in its own mythology. Flames licked the corners of the terraces where couples had once danced. Smoke coiled through the corridors where deals had been struck, and the roar of the ocean seemed to mock the fragility of human endeavor. Still, it rose again, more ornate, more commanding, a phoenix in wood and stone, shimmering against the fog like a defiance of mortality. In those reconstructions, obsession became architecture. Every balustrade carved with painstaking precision, every window positioned to catch the perfect angle of sunlight, every room arranged to maximize both visibility and secrecy. There was an almost cruel elegance to the planning, an insistence that beauty demand cost not merely financial, but human. Workers whispered of impossible hours, of tasks repeated to perfection only to be redone at the whim of an exacting eye. Patrons who lingered behind closed doors noted tensions, small betrayals, and silent confrontations. The mansion was never just a place of leisure. It was a crucible in which desire, ambition, and quiet suffering were distilled, producing something radiant yet fundamentally unstable. And yet, for all its grandeur, the Cliff House retained a sense of isolation. Despite the crowds that came to witness its terraces and gardens, the house seemed to exist in its own atmosphere, a world apart from the city that had birthed it. The fog would roll in with sudden intensity, swallowing balconies and roofs, muting the colors of opulence, softening the laughter into ghostly echoes. Here, even the wealthy could feel the edge of vulnerability, the stark reminder that beauty is always fleeting, that human control is an illusion. It was in these moments, with fog pressing against windows and wind rattling shutters, that the mansion revealed its quiet, almost cruel intelligence, the sense that every act of pride carries within it the seed of humility, that the pursuit of perfection is inseparable from the inevitability of loss. Stories emerged, often whispered, sometimes recorded in the yellowed pages of diaries or the brittle corners of letters. Patrons spoke of fleeting romances and sudden departures, of fortunes made and unmade in the corridors where the light struck just so. Some spoke of despair, of nights spent staring at the crashing surf below, imagining the world beyond the cliffs, imagining escape from the weight of expectation. There were those who became obsessed with the house itself, as if its walls contained a promise of clarity, or perhaps a secret that would justify ambition or soothe regret. And always, the mansion endured patient, unyielding, indifferent to human triumph and suffering alike. The Cliff House, even in its earliest incarnation, was a negotiation between man and nature, ambition and mortality, beauty and cost. Every balcony held the echo of conversation and laughter. Every pane of glass reflected the sky and sea and something more, the quiet, invisible price of desire. It was a house that demanded attention, demanded care, demanded emotional investment, and in doing so, it exacted its toll. Yet, paradoxically, it was also a place of transcendence. Patrons who visited remembered the first sight of sunrise glinting on the ocean, the smell of salt in the air, the way the house seemed to breathe along with the wind. These moments, fleeting and fragile, justified the obsession, justified the loss, justified the human cost. The Cliff House was never simply a building. It was a living testament to the contradictions of aspiration, a vessel in which beauty, tragedy, and ambition were inseparable. Even now, when the first outlines of the original structure exist only in photographs and archival sketches, the story remains palpable. Walk the bluff today, hear the waves crash, smell the salt and seaweed, and it is possible to imagine the figures in gowns and suits, the whispered conversations, the hidden passions, the quiet despair, all of it pressing against the walls that once were. The mansion is gone, yet it persists in memory and in myth, a place where human longing met nature's indifferent grandeur, a house built to contain beauty and ambition and, inevitably, sorrow. The first thing that strikes anyone approaching the Cliff House, even in photographs, is the audacity of its silhouette. Turrets rise like fingers grasping at fog, gables and spires layered in intricate choreography, each jutting corner a statement of intent, a declaration that beauty must demand attention, and that attention carries its own cost. From a distance, it appears effortless, a natural extension of the cliff itself, yet the reality was painstaking, obsessive, and exacting. Every angle, every window, every line of decorative wood was the result of deliberation so meticulous it bordered on obsession. Builders whispered that certain balustrades were repositioned 3, 4, 5 times until the shadow they cast at sunset struck exactly the right note. Wealth was abundant, but time, sweat, and quiet frustration were equally spent, etched invisibly into every surface. Walk closer, and the facade reveals layers of intention, not all immediately visible. The woodwork, carved with impossible precision, captures not only light but the attention of those who linger too long, those who let their eyes wander over the curves and angles. It is seductive in a way that unsettles. Patrons marveled at the gilded trims, the latticework that seemed more lace than wood, the windows arranged to frame moments of the ocean that shifted by the hour. Inside, the ceilings were painted with a delicacy that demanded silence, each brushstroke a testament to ambition, each panel a reminder that beauty, no matter how breathtaking, has a hidden ledger of toil and tension. Craftsmen worked with trembling hands to honor the vision, yet their own voices, their own struggles, were erased in service to the larger narrative. And yet, for all its visible grandeur, the house was designed to hide as much as it revealed. There were corridors that curved in unexpected ways, rooms tucked behind doors that were never meant to be discovered, windows positioned to allow observation without being seen. Every balcony offered a view of the ocean, but some were also stages for private reckoning, where ambitions collided in silence. Gentlemen would pace, their eyes flicking to another man's success, calculating, jealous. Women would linger near shutters, overhearing fragments of conversation, their hearts caught between curiosity and caution. The mansion was more than structure. It was a vessel of observation, a repository of human longing, and it was perfectly aware of its power. The interior was a labyrinth of contrasts, each room a study in tension. Drawing rooms were flooded with sunlight that gleamed on polished floors, yet the corners remained in shadow, where secrets whispered among themselves. Staircases rose and fell in elegant arcs, but some ended in small landings meant only for solitude, for reflection, for quiet despair. Floors groaned under footfalls, carrying the weight of ambition, of expectation, of human fragility. Every chandelier was a crown suspended above the heads of those who dared to walk beneath it, a reminder that beauty exacts attention, that splendor carries a responsibility, and that every step inside the house was a negotiation between desire and restraint. Even the gardens, designed with geometric precision, betrayed the mansion's dual nature. From above, they were perfect patterns, a harmony of form and color meant to impress visitors and assert mastery over nature. Yet in the shadows of hedges and beneath arching trellises, tension lingered. Lovers whispered beneath flowers whose fragrance could mask fear or desire. Rivals argued in hushed tones, while sunlight fell like judgment across carefully tended petals. Every detail, from the placement of stone paths to the curve of a fountain, was measured not only for beauty, but for its ability to shape emotion, to guide behavior, to manipulate perception. The mansion, inside and out, demanded not just admiration but obedience, a silent acquiescence to its vision and its unspoken rules. Materials, too, carried stories of quiet sacrifice. Imported wood, polished to a sheen that caught the sea's reflection, required months of preparation and labor that left artisans exhausted, their hands raw, their pride hidden behind forced smiles. Glass panes, each cut to fit a frame that had been carefully measured and remeasured, reflected more than light. They reflected anxiety, the unrelenting pressure to achieve perfection. Even the paint was chosen with deliberation, with the knowledge that certain hues would evoke specific emotions, that walls could be instruments of mood, that the house itself could orchestrate the feelings of those who crossed its thresholds. Each choice, though beautiful, carried a hidden cost, a reminder that elegance is inseparable from human struggle. Lighting, in particular, was both tool and spectacle. Daylight was guided by the orientation of windows, designed to flood salons with warmth at precise hours, to illuminate conversations, to accentuate features and intentions alike. At night, gas lamps glowed softly, shadows flickering in a way that suggested mystery, that allowed for observation without intrusion. Parties were conducted in this manipulated light, a choreography of sight and secrecy, where gestures could be exaggerated or hidden, where laughter might mask fear, or desire, or envy. Even the simple act of seeing, of being seen, was mediated by the architecture itself, and in that mediation, tension was encoded, subtle but inescapable. And there were rooms that seemed almost impossible to describe. One parlor, with walls of mirrored glass, doubled every figure, every movement, creating a space of infinite reflection, a place where vanity and anxiety collided. Patrons who lingered too long, reported feeling watched, not by others but by the house itself, as if the mirrors had absorbed ambition and impatience and returned it in a spectral echo. Here, the mansion revealed its most intimate power. It could not only contain human aspiration, it could shape it, warp it, heighten it, turning desire into obsession and admiration into fear. The line between comfort and surveillance, between beauty and manipulation, was deliberately blurred, and those who crossed it felt the pull of both exhilaration and dread. And yet, despite the meticulous planning, the mansion was never fully under human control. The wind that whipped across the cliffs could shatter windows, carry salt into woodwork, force repairs and adaptation. The fog rolled in with its own agenda, cloaking terraces, softening edges, erasing boundaries. Light and shadow, sun and storm, played across the architecture, reminding everyone who entered that human perfection is fragile, that ambition is never absolute, and that the pursuit of beauty is inseparable from humility before forces greater than ourselves. Even in triumph, even in the display of wealth, the mansion whispered of vulnerability, of impermanence, of the quiet cost of mastery over both nature and desire. It is perhaps in these tensions, in the constant negotiation between intention and circumstance, that the true genius of the Cliff House emerges. Architecture here was never neutral. It was active, alive, shaping human emotion, guiding movement, orchestrating attention. It offered glimpses of joy, moments of awe, yet at the same time demanded endurance, patience, and acceptance of the subtle, almost cruel, limits of human control. Beauty came at a price, and those who paid it found themselves altered, aware of the mansion's unspoken demands, its quiet insistence that one can never truly separate splendor from sacrifice, desire from discipline, observation from being observed. Even before entering the house, those who approached the Cliff House felt its pulse, subtle yet insistent, like a heartbeat beneath the boards and beams. Visitors arrived expecting sunlight, ocean spray, elegance, but found something deeper, almost imperceptible, a mansion that observed them as much as they observed it. Patrons whispered of fleeting glances that lingered too long, of subtle gestures that carried unspoken meaning, of tensions that seemed suspended in the very air. Inside, the mansion's walls were alive with history, and every room held traces of lives lived in pursuit of beauty, power, and fleeting joy, each echo resonating with both desire and restraint. It was here that human drama unfolded in full complexity, where the glitter of wealth concealed fractures so subtle they could be overlooked until it was too late. Parties were performances, choreographed yet unpredictable, where appearances mattered more than truth, and every smile hid calculation. Gentlemen measured themselves against one another not only in wealth but in poise, in their ability to charm, to impress, to dominate conversation while remaining elegantly restrained. Women traded secrets behind embroidered fans, their laughter a delicate veil over ambitions that could not be spoken aloud. Rivalries blossomed quietly, cultivated over cups of tea and glasses of wine, and tension threaded every gesture. The mansion itself seemed complicit, its mirrors reflecting more than light, its balconies offering vantage points for observation and judgment, and every delicate detail of design magnifying both beauty and the quiet cost of maintaining it. Some stories were fleeting, passing as quickly as the fog that rolled across the cliffs, visible only to those who paid attention. A young heiress, new to the city and untested in the rituals of wealth, wandered into the drawing room one evening and was quietly ensnared in the gaze of a man whose intentions were never fully spoken. Observers noted the shift in her posture, the way her laughter tightened at the edges, how her eyes flitted from window to mirror as if seeking a secret escape. Later, in the pages of a diary, she described the sensation of being watched not only by the man but by the mansion itself, as if the very architecture conspired to hold her in a spotlight she could neither refuse nor control. The house, in these moments, became a participant in human ambition, a silent witness to longing, intrigue, and restraint. Other dramas were more deliberate, cultivated with the patience of obsession. A business magnate, wealthy beyond measure but insecure in manners and appearance, invited rivals to the terrace under the guise of hospitality, only to engineer conversations that revealed weakness, miscalculation, or pride too easily wounded. The mansion framed these interactions, sunlight striking polished floors at just the right angle to catch the glint of envy in a silver goblet, shadows falling over whispered words that would later determine alliances and betrayals. Architecture and human intent intertwined, and those who failed to see the orchestration paid subtle, emotional costs. Diminished reputations, quiet humiliation, the gnawing knowledge that their lives had been subtly manipulated by forces both human and structural. Romance, too, carried weight beyond simple desire. Lovers met in secret, slipping through corridors designed to suggest openness while concealing privacy. Their passion was heightened by the mansion's design, a mirrored parlor reflecting infinite possibilities, staircases winding into corners where whispers could be carried without detection, terraces that felt suspended between earth and sky. But even in intimacy, the house exacted a toll. The pressure to maintain appearances, to navigate the expectations of wealth and propriety, created an undercurrent of tension. Every stolen moment was shadowed by fear of discovery, every embrace tempered by the weight of legacy, every promise shaped by the knowledge that the mansion could observe, remember, and expose. Not all stories ended in triumph or quiet satisfaction. Tragedy crept slowly, imperceptibly at first, then with devastating inevitability. One patron, a young man of promising fortune and fragile confidence, disappeared one fog-laden evening, leaving only traces of his presence. A jacket draped over a chair, an unfinished note, footprints leading nowhere. Speculation whispered through the corridors, accident, despair, some darker turn of human misfortune, and the mansion absorbed it all, the echoes of uncertainty pressing against the walls, becoming part of the ongoing narrative. Those who remained were haunted not by scandal alone, but by the invisible ledger of loss and longing that the house maintained. A quiet reminder that every act of beauty, every display of wealth, carries hidden consequences. The servants, too, played a silent role in the mansion's theater, their presence often invisible, yet essential. They navigated the same labyrinth of corridors and balconies, understanding the unspoken rules, anticipating rivalries, diffusing tension with practiced smiles, and at times observing moments never meant to be seen. Their labor was both literal and emotional, a constant negotiation of visibility and discretion. A misplaced gesture could spark subtle conflict, an overheard remark could shift alliances or awaken jealousy, and yet the mansion relied on their discretion, their endurance, their unflinching presence. They were participants in the human drama, essential yet often invisible, their own ambitions and anxieties interwoven with those of their patrons in ways that left marks as subtle as the scratches on a polished floor. And there were the whispers of obsession, stories passed quietly between those who had spent enough time to recognize the mansion's subtle influence. Some patrons became fixated on the mansion itself, on the symmetry of a window, the curvature of a railing, the perfect reflection of light on polished surfaces. They measured themselves against it, comparing human desire to architectural ambition, finding themselves wanting, envious, inadequate, and yet irresistibly drawn back. The house demanded attention, not only for what it offered but for what it revealed about the observers themselves, the hidden anxieties that could only be exposed in the quiet, watchful moments within its walls. Yet even amid tension and tragedy, the mansion allowed moments of transcendence, fleeting glimpses of awe that justified the weight of its demands. A sunrise spilling across the ocean, reflected in stained glass. The sudden hush that fell over a crowded room as a breeze carried the scent of salt and garden blooms. Laughter that, though calculated, felt genuine in its momentary perfection. These instances of beauty were intensified by the human struggle that surrounded them, made more vivid because they emerged from a theater of ambition, desire, and quiet suffering. Each visitor carried them away, imprinted by the mansion's dual power, to elevate and to observe, to inspire and to expose, to reward those who endured and unsettle those who faltered. The Cliff House was never simply a building. It was an active participant in human emotion. Ambition collided with fear, love collided with secrecy, pride collided with envy. Every corner, every terrace, every mirrored wall contributed to a choreography of tension that was as deliberate as it was invisible. Patrons left changed, sometimes unaware of the ways the mansion had shaped them, how it had demanded vigilance, subtlety, and endurance. The house observed, recorded, remembered, and in doing so, transformed human drama into legend, quiet lives into myth, fleeting encounters into echoes that persist in memory, in photographs, in the salt-laden fog that still clings to the cliffs above the Pacific. Even after the laughter faded and the parties ended, the Cliff House never truly slept. Its walls retained a quiet consciousness, an almost sentient awareness of what transpired within them. Visitors sometimes felt it in fleeting moments. A draft brushing their necks where no window was open, the subtle shift of light across a floorboard, shadows that lingered longer than natural law would allow. Rooms that seemed ordinary by day took on a different character by night, corridors elongating in perception, corners swallowing the eye's certainty. Objects appeared to move, not in mischief, but as though the house itself was arranging memories, curating fragments of life it had observed, and deciding who would bear witness to them. Hidden passageways were discovered by accident or curiosity, small doors tucked behind paneling, staircases winding into darkness where no official plan had ever recorded them. The house revealed itself selectively, rewarding patience and daring, and punishing those who presumed mastery over it. Architects and builders swore the corridors had been precise, but the more time spent within the mansion, the more impossible their original intentions seemed. The walls were mapped with secrets, layered in whispers and echoes, each creak a sentence in a story that was never fully spoken aloud. Visitors who lingered too long reported glimpses of figures that were not there, of letters half-written and never mailed, of rooms that existed only when no one was looking. One parlor in particular became the locus of obsession. Mirrored walls reflected the sun at precise angles, multiplying reflections in ways that disoriented and enchanted. Patrons who lingered there found themselves lost, both in space and thought, their ambitions and fears mirrored infinitely. Some swore the mirrors whispered, carrying voices from past inhabitants, fragments of arguments, confessions of love and betrayal. Others reported seeing a figure, always in the corner, watching silently, never moving, its presence more sensed than seen, as though the house had assumed the role of a guardian of its own secrets. In this room, beauty and anxiety were inseparable, desire folded into dread, fascination entwined with fear. Letters hidden behind walls were uncovered decades later, their paper brittle, ink faded, yet their messages seared with the same intensity that had inspired them. They spoke of forbidden liaisons, fortunes wagered on quiet whispers, debts paid in silence, not currency. Some letters described patrons so consumed by ambition that they were unaware the house was observing their every move, documenting intentions and regrets alike. Others revealed feuds that had been carefully masked with politeness, the simmering resentment of rivals documented in meticulous handwriting, a silent testament to human obsession and pride. The mansion did not discriminate. It recorded the small victories and quiet tragedies with equal diligence, an impartial chronicler of ambition's invisible cost. Down in the service corridors, where most visitors never tread, secrets accumulated with a subtle, almost physical weight. The staff, attuned to the mansion's rhythms, moved like shadows themselves, carrying knowledge that patrons never suspected. A discarded glove might mark a whispered rendezvous. A misaligned tray could signal unspoken rivalry. The house provided these hints in ways that tested observation, sharpening human curiosity, and sometimes, obsession. Servants became both guardians and unwilling participants, their loyalty to discretion as essential to the mansion's function as its timber and stone. In their footsteps, the quiet history of ambition, desire, and subtle cruelty left a record more permanent than any ledger or photograph. Even the architecture itself seemed to conceal stories in plain sight. Turrets, balconies, and corners created vantage points, both practical and psychological. One could watch without being seen, overhear without interruption, calculate advantage while maintaining civility. Some rooms had dual purposes, their design seeming to offer comfort while secretly dictating behavior. A staircase might curve to delay movement, A window might frame a view to distract attention from the more important observation point behind it. Every line, every shadow, every angle was deliberate, a subtle manipulation of human attention and emotion. The mansion's brilliance was inseparable from its quiet cruelty, for in crafting beauty so intricate, it also crafted tension, curiosity, and occasionally despair. Stories persisted, even when witnesses had long departed. A young woman, intent on mapping the mansion's spaces, discovered a locked door behind an unused parlor. She forced it open, revealing a room frozen in time, chairs covered in dust, a desk littered with notes, a fireplace untouched for decades. On the desk lay a single journal, recording a life constrained by ambition, fear, and obsession. The entries were meticulous, describing daily interactions that seemed trivial at first, yet revealed a hidden network of influence and manipulation. Patrons moved through the mansion, believing themselves in control, unaware that the structure itself guided them, observed them, and archived the subtle costs of their own desires. And the ocean below, ever constant, added another layer to the mansion's secretive power. Waves smashed against cliffs, eroding stone, carrying fragments of the past into the abyss. Some patrons vanished, lost to accidents, despair, or impulsive decisions made in moments of obsession, leaving the mansion to absorb their absence, to incorporate it into its record. The sea became a partner in secrecy, erasing evidence while amplifying memory, a reminder that some truths are never fully accessible, and yet the tension they create is palpable. The house and ocean together formed a theater of concealment, guiding human behavior as much through the possibility of loss as through the architecture itself. Hidden compartments and locked drawers, discovered by curious heirs or daring historians, revealed objects that spoke volumes without words. A locket, a faded photograph, a set of keys without explanation. Each became a portal to a story half-lived, half-concealed. They carried traces of emotion, longing, regret, passion, despair. The mansion's design ensured that such objects were never found too easily, demanding patience and attention, rewarding the observant while frustrating the careless. In this way, the house perpetuated its own mythology, a living archive of human obsession, a silent teacher of consequence, and the hidden toll of desire. Some nights, visitors reported hearing movement where none could exist, soft footsteps echoing in halls long abandoned, curtains brushing as if touched by invisible hands. The mansion seemed to breathe with memory, to respond to attention, to shape experience with subtle intention. Even in decay, it retained control over perception, guiding emotion through spatial design, sensory suggestion, and the invisible weight of history. Every shadow, every creak, every draft contributed to the narrative, each a thread woven into a tapestry of secrets, ambition, and the quiet, unrelenting cost of beauty. It was this cumulative awareness that gave the Cliff House its most enduring power. It was never merely a building, never a backdrop to human ambition. It was an active participant in the drama, curating observation, shaping perception, and quietly enforcing consequence. Patrons learned, sometimes with dread, sometimes with awe, that within these walls, beauty and secrecy are inseparable, that ambition carries invisible ledgers, and that the mansion itself, patient and meticulous, preserves the hidden human costs in ways both subtle and unforgettable. The cliffs themselves remain unchanged, indifferent to the centuries of human ambition that have risen and fallen above them. Waves crash relentlessly against the jagged rocks below, carrying salt and spray, carrying fragments of stories the ocean will never fully return. From the bluff, the remains of the Cliff House stand in fragile silhouette, skeletal yet proud, like a monument suspended between memory and reality. Even in ruin, it commands attention, its presence a testament to aspiration, to the human insistence on beauty, to the desire to leave something permanent on a landscape defined by impermanence. Visitors pause at the edge, drawn by history and rumor, yet unaware of the full weight of the mansion's silent testimony, the way it still watches, still absorbs, still whispers of ambition, obsession, and loss. The once polished wood has weathered to muted tones, the painted walls peeled and faded, yet there is a strange dignity in decay. Every broken balustrade, every cracked window, every warped floorboard tells its own story of resistance and surrender, of forces both human and natural. The mansion, once meticulously controlled, now exists under the authority of wind, rain, and time. And yet, even as it succumbs to erosion, it remains alive in perception, a vessel of memory and myth. People linger along the terraces, imagining the elegance that once filled these spaces, imagining the lives carefully curated within its walls, and in doing so, they become participants in a history that is at once visible and intangible, architectural and emotional. The sense of absence is almost palpable. Where laughter once cascaded through rooms, only echoes remain, bouncing across empty halls, amplifying the subtle loneliness of what has been lost. Guests move carefully across uneven floors, their footsteps seeming too loud, intrusive in the presence of lingering memory. Each shutterless window frames the vast Pacific, and in that frame, one senses both majesty and mortality. The house is a study in duality, permanence and impermanence, opulence and ruin, presence and absence. Patrons of the past, whose ambitions and obsessions once filled every corner, are now reduced to shadows in the imagination. Yet their emotional traces linger, woven into the grain of the timber and the curve of the terraces, inseparable from the landscape itself. Time has softened the mansion's edges, yet the design choices, obsessive and deliberate, remain legible. Balconies still catch the light at precise angles, even as salt and wind erode the details. Staircases, warped though they are, retain the deliberate choreography of movement intended to impress, to control sightlines, to orchestrate human emotion. Even decay has not diminished the mansion's capacity to observe, to influence, to create tension. Those who linger in certain rooms report sensations inexplicable by architecture alone. A sense of being watched, of footsteps where none exist, a subtle shift in perception that recalls the mansion's original design to guide, to manipulate, to record in ways invisible but undeniable. Visitors sometimes discover fragments of the human stories that gave the house its pulse. A diary, hidden beneath floorboards, recounts an afternoon of whispered arguments between social rivals. A tarnished brooch, wedged in a corner, recalls a stolen moment of intimacy. The house is littered with relics of lives carefully performed, carefully observed, carefully preserved in silence. Each fragment invites speculation, ignites curiosity, and underscores the emotional cost of beauty, ambition, and secrecy. The mansion's ruin does not diminish these traces. If anything, it amplifies them, allowing imagination to fill in gaps where architecture once dictated human behavior, where wealth once exacted subtle tolls. Nature, relentless and indifferent, has reclaimed parts of the house with an almost tender patience. Moss creeps along stonework, waves undermine foundations, wind strips paint, and yet the mansion resists, holding fragments aloft like stubborn memories refusing to vanish. This interplay between human ambition and elemental force is central to the present condition of the Cliff House. Beauty remains, even if fragmented. Tension persists, even if unseen. Memory endures, even if half forgotten. Patrons standing on the bluff can feel it, even without understanding why. The house is a vessel of human emotion, a chronicle of obsession, a monument to the invisible costs of grandeur. Contemporary visitors bring their own narratives, layering curiosity over history. Couples wander terraces, whispering, not knowing they echo conversations of long-departed guests. Tourists photograph decayed woodwork and crashing waves, unaware that the house is already framing their perception, shaping emotion as meticulously as it did in its prime. Even in abandonment, the mansion orchestrates experience. Light, shadow, perspective, and sound combine to manipulate attention, to create awe, to provoke reflection. It is architecture as performance, but now the audience includes anyone who dares approach the bluff, extending human tension into the present, connecting past obsession to present wonder. Conservationists tread lightly across these fragile remnants, aware of the duality of their task: to preserve without destroying, to stabilize without erasing mystery. Scaffolding leans like delicate arteries supporting a fragile heart, Tools move through corridors once alive with laughter and whispers. Hands trace eroded carvings that tell silent stories. Each intervention is a negotiation between permanence and impermanence, necessity and restraint. Preservation itself becomes a continuation of the mansion's original drama, a careful act that echoes the obsessive attention to detail once demanded by its creators, yet now shadowed by humility in the face of nature's insistence and time's relentless march. The cliffs themselves remain a partner in this ongoing narrative. Tourists and historians alike sense that the edge is both boundary and invitation. Look too far, and the ocean reminds visitors of fragility, mortality, and loss. Linger too long, and the house's presence becomes palpable, subtle, and commanding, a reminder that human ambition, however grand, is always subject to forces beyond control. The mansion and its environment create a tension that is both aesthetic and psychological, a resonance between beauty, danger, and quiet memory, intensified by the knowledge that the house has witnessed centuries of ambition, failure, desire, and obsession. Even the air carries significance. Salt, fog, and wind mingle with the faint scent of decayed wood and garden remnants, creating a sensory experience that transcends sight. Every inhalation is a reminder of what the mansion demanded in life: attention, effort, refinement, patience, and endurance. Visitors may sense it without consciously naming it, a subtle tension beneath wonder, a quiet anxiety beneath admiration, the cost of human ambition rendered palpable through atmosphere and space. The Cliff House, even in its ruin, continues to shape human emotion, to teach the price of beauty, to evoke curiosity, to provoke reflection on the delicate balance between aspiration and vulnerability. The house's presence today is both elegy and testament. It reminds those who approach that wealth and beauty are inseparable from struggle and sacrifice, that every triumph is shadowed by impermanence, and that human tension persists in spaces long abandoned. Patrons of the past, their ambitions and obsessions, are present in the whisper of wind across terraces, the echo of waves against stone, the subtle play of light and shadow across eroded balustrades. The mansion endures not simply as a building, but as a living archive, a vessel for human memory, curiosity, and quiet suffering, a monument to both the visible and invisible costs of grandeur, a space where beauty, history, and emotion converge with relentless intensity. The wind that sweeps across the cliffs carries a history that is at once fragile and defiant, whispering through the ruins of the Cliff House as if reminding the world that time and beauty are always in negotiation. Today, preservationists approach with reverence, knowing they are not merely stabilizing timber and stone, but negotiating with memory itself. Every beam they reinforce, every fragile panel they secure, is an act of care that acknowledges both human aspiration and the inexorable forces of nature. They tread lightly, conscious that the house is a living archive, its architecture a repository of triumphs, obsessions, and quiet suffering, and that any attempt at control must respect the invisible ledger of emotion embedded within its walls. Conservation here is slow, deliberate, and obsessive, much like the mansion's original construction. Specialists measure every fracture, assess every warp in wood and stone, and record every crack that has grown with years of wind and salt. Yet no technical intervention can fully account for the mansion's intangible weight, the subtle ways it shapes perception, memory, and curiosity. A balustrade may be shored up, but the tension it once created, the way it commanded gaze, shaped movement, and observed the ambitions of those who leaned upon it remains, echoing through air and imagination. Preservation becomes not merely an act of engineering, but an emotional negotiation, a dialogue with the past, a pact to honor both beauty and consequence. There is a paradox in attempting to preserve something so infused with human drama. The mansion was designed to observe, to manipulate, to impress, and to exact subtle costs from those who entered. To stabilize it is to intervene in a story that is still alive, a story written in the curves of staircases, in the angles of windows, in the shadows cast by turrets and gables. Every restoration decision carries moral and emotional weight. To restore too much risks erasing the traces of tension and imperfection that made the house psychologically vibrant. To restore too little risks, allowing time and nature to obliterate the delicate interplay of beauty, ambition, and quiet human suffering that defines its identity. Preservation, in this sense, becomes a careful negotiation with narrative itself. The planning extends beyond structural integrity. Conservationists are acutely aware that the mansion's terraces, stairways, and observation points are more than architecture. They are instruments of emotion. A repaired balcony must not merely stand. It must still frame the ocean, still guide perception, still create the tension between exposure and safety that the original builders so deliberately orchestrated. Walkways are reinforced, yet their rhythm and perspective are preserved to maintain the choreography of movement, the subtle control of line of sight, the quiet shaping of human behavior. The mansion is at once fragile and commanding, and those tasked with its preservation must honor both realities, balancing technical mastery with aesthetic fidelity and emotional resonance. Even materials carry stories in the act of restoration. Timber is sourced carefully, chosen to echo the original grain, the original color, the original capacity to bear light and shadow. Stone is selected for durability, but also for the subtle way it interacts with moisture, temperature, and wind. Paint is tested and retested, its hue evaluated not only for appearance, but for the psychological effect on anyone who might linger in a parlor or ascend a staircase. Each choice is a negotiation between permanence and impermanence, necessity and restraint, aesthetic fidelity and historical truth. The mansion's past obsession with detail, with perfection, demands an equally obsessive approach from those seeking to sustain it, even in ruin. Preservation is also a matter of storytelling. The mansion's history, the parties, the rivalries, the secret loves, the whispered tragedies, must be communicated without diminishing the mystery that defines it. Curators, historians, and architects work to create pathways through the house that allow visitors to sense the rhythm of human ambition, to feel the tension embedded in every room, to glimpse the emotional cost of beauty and wealth without revealing every secret. Trails, signage, and guided experiences are crafted with care, designed to provoke curiosity, to elicit reflection, to maintain the mansion's uncanny ability to observe even long after its original inhabitants have vanished. Every visitor becomes a participant in a story that is partially visible, partially hidden, and entirely human. Environmental forces remain a constant consideration. The cliffs erode with each tide, wind gusts rattle weakened structures, storms test the integrity of every beam. Preservationists work with these elements rather than against them, acknowledging that control is always provisional, that human ambition is never absolute. The house's original builders sought to dominate nature. Those now charged with its survival must accept dialogue, negotiation, and compromise. There is humility in this process, a recognition that beauty and grandeur are inseparable from vulnerability, that permanence is an illusion, and that the mansion's true power lies not only in its form, but in its ongoing negotiation with time, human intention, and elemental force. Community engagement has become essential. Local residents, historians, and visitors are drawn into the preservation process, contributing stories, photographs, and oral histories that enrich understanding. These human narratives, when combined with structural analysis, create a fuller sense of the mansion's past and its emotional resonance. Every anecdote, every memory, every carefully preserved object, a letter, a photograph, a fragment of wood, adds depth to the mansion's living archive. The house, in return, rewards attention with the same subtle psychological orchestration that captivated patrons in its prime. A well-placed view of the ocean, a shadow falling across an empty hallway, the faint sound of wind in a forgotten corridor. Plans for the future extend beyond stabilization. There are ambitions to digitize the mansion's historical records, to create virtual reconstructions that allow visitors to experience the mansion as it once was, while simultaneously preserving the fragility of its physical remains. These efforts acknowledge a tension between fidelity and imagination, between the permanence of digital replication and the impermanence of wood, glass, and stone. Preservation thus becomes an ongoing dialogue across mediums and generations, an attempt to honor human aspiration, to respect the mansion's quiet lessons, and to sustain both wonder and curiosity for those who will come long after the present custodians have departed. Even as scaffolding rises and fragile walls are secured, the mansion's presence continues to shape perception, to demand reflection. Visitors feel the weight of history in each room, the resonance of ambition in every stair, the echo of obsession in every balcony and corridor. The Cliff House is at once a physical structure and a living archive of human emotion, a testament to the delicate balance between beauty and cost, grandeur and fragility, ambition and consequence. Preservationists know that their work is never truly complete, for the mansion's dialogue with time, with nature, and with the human heart is ongoing, evolving, and, in many ways, eternal.